Jim Williams. I'm the CMO at UpTempo. Many of you may not be familiar with UpTempo because it's a new brand, a new company that was forged from the merger of three companies that you may be familiar with. Brandmaker, a company called Allocation, and Hive9 came together and rebranded as UpTempo. We are planning software. We focus on the intersection of plan, spend, and work with a mission to help marketers plan better, spend smarter, pivot faster, and execute with confidence. That's our goal. So obviously it's a timely topic for us, given the space that we're in as well. I am delighted to be joined by Craig Moore, who's a VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Craig, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Craig, if you have not worked with Craig, and I think many of us have, if we're in marketing and marketing leadership, but Craig has been at Forrester Research, and prior to that at Serious Decisions for 12 years now. He is the person to go to when you talk about marketing planning. He leads the marketing planning practice, and he frequently consults with organizations of all sizes on how to tie your go-to-market initiatives to corporate goals like revenue targets, corporate objectives, how to get to ROI. And of course, he could be the most popular man at Forrester right now in October, given his focus. So thank you, Craig, as well for joining. I can imagine you're very busy, so I'm delighted to have you here with us.
It's planning season. It's a busy time of the year.
It is. Final thing I'll do is just quick agenda, what we're going to go through, and the housekeeping, which of course you have to do with every webinar. So we got a little bit of a special agenda planned here today. Craig and I will both be talking, of course, about marketing planning and how to be prepared for change, which I'm looking forward to. But we'll go probably 35 minutes. We'll leave plenty of time for questions. I was in a recent workshop with Craig where it seemed like every one of the slides you went through, it listed a lot of questions, a lot of commentating. So I would encourage the audience to get involved as well. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions. You can use chat to banter back and forth as well, but we will pay attention to the Q&A feature. We will, of course, record today's session and we'll make it available to you afterwards for you to share with your friends, family, and loved ones. And the last thing I think I've just mentioned is often you do these webinars, they're sponsored and hosted by a vendor, and they're great, awesome thought leadership, learnings, best practices, but you're kind of left wondering, well, why would UpTempo do this? So for those of you that are interested, we're offering a special backstage pass session. So at the end of the Q&A, if you want to stick around and see how we provide a marketing system of record for planning, financial management, and work management, stick around. We'll provide a 15-minute overview of the platform we provide to marketing teams. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just jump into it, Craig.
All right. So I want to ground our conversation today because the term planning is applied to many different things, and as is the term strategy. So today, what we're going to talk about is annual marketing planning. And we just look at that as the process of lining up marketing's objectives to the business objectives and to plot out what the organization wants to do for the next year. But that kind of nests into a whole host of planning at the higher level. Go ahead and put the build up. There are other kinds of plans being developed. So there's a corporate strategy that should be written down somewhere, but it's not always. But it generally is a 3 to 5 year view of where the company wants to go. It represents the aspirations of the organization, the markets that the company desires to get into, maybe some of the trends of buyers or technology trends are encapsulated in a corporate strategy. And that's what the company sort of looks to as to where it wants to go from year to year. And then aligned with that are a product or a service offering roadmap. And this operates somewhat asynchronously from the revenue plan and the marketing plan, but it is bringing together the innovation of the organization and what the products or offerings are that you plan over a period of time. And then in most organizations, sales, or in an emerging way today, we see a lot of chief revenue officers coming in to build the revenue plan. And all of those are being developed and in somewhat independent sets of activities from the annual marketing plan, but the annual marketing plan is fed by a lot of that information. And then underneath the annual marketing plan are the campaign plans. And when we think of campaigns at Forrester, we think of these big marketing, go-to-market initiatives that could last longer than a year. So you might have campaigns that were started last year or before, or you might be starting some this year. And part of your planning process might be to end a campaign during the plan year as well. So these campaigns are running somewhat asynchronously to the marketing plan. And then within the campaigns, we look at the program plans, and inside programs are tactics. And so that's our taxonomy and what we think about. And what we're going to focus on today is the annual marketing planning process. Let's go to the next slide.
Great. So I am looking forward to getting into this because of something that I certainly haven't encountered over the last couple of years, working at Uptempo, and even more recently, this what I call plan anxiety, intense, palpable anxiety around planning. As you mentioned, this is an extremely popular topic right around now, and so why is that? Why is there so much anxiety around planning? I had a couple of conversations recently. I am involved in a community, which I would highly recommend if you're a marketing executive, called the CMO Coffee Talk. We regularly get together and talk about issues, topics of interest, and planning comes up again and again. We also just recently did a customer advisory board. We had 10 enterprise customers. They're talking about issues with planning. And some of the things that I kind of pulled away from it is, number one, most fundamentally, is not many marketers learned how to plan. I don't have an MBA, but maybe audience members do. But there was no formal training process or education around how to build a plan, especially a plan that needs to hold up to the dynamic kind of environment that characterizes today's business. You start out as a marketer and you learn a specific area, a function, demand gen, product marketing, customer, whatever it might be, brand marketing. And then eventually you lead a team, and then eventually you move to a leadership position. And that's when you have to start building plans. Sometimes it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. So that's one reason. I think another one is there's very, very high expectations around plans. Right? You just showed how the marketing plan ladders up to corporate objectives and revenue plans. So you are simultaneously managing up with the plan and making sure you meet expectations of people that might be at a higher pay grade, frankly. And at the same time, providing as much clarity down, cascading down through very large, complicated, distributed teams with the plan. And that's a challenge. There's very high expectations around that. I would say that most people that I talk to are desperate for a framework, a pattern, if you will. We're going to talk about that, what Forrester's planning framework looks like. People are somewhat desperate for that, akin to how they were desperate for something like called the demand funnel, like a sense of order to the job that they're doing, right? Or more recently, this notion of account-based marketing or the customer experience management. There are frameworks and systems around that, but not as much around planning. So that's another reason. There's a lot of nuance to planning. It is not just kind of a logical exercise, but you need to engage and motivate teams. You have to kind of balance creativity with data around planning. And then finally, and this is a bit self-interested on my part, but there's no central system where plans reside. Right? There's no platform really today that everybody can log into and get universal visibility to understand what is a plan, what are we doing right now, how does that support these corporate objectives, how is that funded, what's the work happening. There doesn't seem to be that marketing system of record, and so that creates some anxiety around planning as well. Yeah, so let's jump into at least some of these, Greg.
Yeah, I think the idea of marketing starting to think about a marketing system of record is a good move. I mean, you look at all the technology that marketing uses, most of it's about trying to do some form of demand to understand intent. And, there's really not a broadly acknowledged sense of what is it the marketing is trying to achieve and how do we prove it. And I think the idea of working towards a system of record makes a lot of sense for marketers, those that want to be accountable, and organizations want to hold marketing accountable. So it seems to be the right direction that we should all be heading. Well, let's go to the next slide and look at some of the common planning problems. And, I talk to a lot of people in different organizations that are doing various forms of marketing planning, and the problems kind of collect into these three categories. One is that they take an approach to looking at what we did last year to try to build this year's plan, sort of a bottoms up approach. And what you end up with when you do something like that is probably a long list of tactics. And often those tactics are sponsorships and events, and they can consume a huge part of your budget. And when you put all of those things together, it's often very difficult to, even at the very beginning of the planning process, to see how that kind of a plan is going to be easy to map to the overall business objectives of the company, the revenue objectives by segment. If you're just doing bottoms up planning, it might be very difficult to do that. The other thing that happens in marketing organizations is that you get a structure so that there's a bunch of teams in marketing, usually aligned around disciplines. So they're experts in a certain aspect of marketing, and often they have their own budget and they build their own plans. And so what happens is you end up with these siloed teams in organizations, all expert in their domain, but not necessarily working in a collaborative way. So you end up with a lot of parallel activities taking place, and you end up with mixed messages to buyers and to customers. It creates all kinds of problems when you're not operating in a synchronized way. And then finally, we see kind of an urgent focus on helping the short-term sale, supporting sales, trying to either drive leads into the top of the funnel because sales need something, or supporting them in the late stage pipeline acceleration activities, but almost always just focused on what we can do in the near term. And often that's related to power and politics in the organization, where sales is sort of demanding that marketing help them, with their numbers. But what starts to happen is that if you over rotate on short-term marketing planning, then you can't do the longer term things that are really important to build an effective marketing organization over time. So investment in things like developing personas, maybe even investment in your own organization, enabling them to learn more about modern marketing so that they can be more effective marketing personnel overall. So the short-term focus tends to forget about the long term, and you end up constantly in this sort of treadmill of marketing activities, all focused on the short run. And it just becomes very hard to demonstrate the bottom line value that the organization delivers to the business overall. And we see this in data. And we did a study, well, we do studies all the time. And recently we did a study on asking CMOs about the importance of planning and what they wanted to get out of it. And about half of them, 42% anyway, told us that they really want to improve their marketing planning processes. They recognized that they were broken or insufficient, and that they really felt that as a major priority, top 2 or 3 priorities for the next year. Many of them told us that planning was high up on the list. And similarly, they also point out that it's really important to be able to build a marketing plan and then adapt that marketing plan to circumstances as they change. So recognizing that it's not just about getting it all down and breathing a sigh of relief, but you have to recognize that the environment changes, and you may have products that get delayed, or there may be some economic situation that occurs that you have to react to, and being able to do that in an effective way is really critical. Let's go on to the next slide. So what we want to look at are the things you need to do effective planning. So we've broken this into 4 major categories. The first is the information you need to build a plan. So you need to understand what the business objectives are. You need to know the targets for the organization, what you're trying to achieve. You need to know what the organization has to sell, right? What are the products or the services, the offerings that the organization is going to sell, and how does that affect what you do from a marketing program planning or campaign planning perspective? You need to know the environment. That's the competitive environment, the transactional environment that you're operating within. And one of the things that really helps to know is the effectiveness of your marketing tactics. I mean, every organization has its own fingerprint in terms of what works and what doesn't work for them from a marketing perspective, and be able to leverage that past data gives you the ability to predict how well you're going to do in the year ahead. Now, you also need some sort of a process, some way of building a marketing plan, of managing your budget. I put content in here as an element in this process because it just consumes so much of what you do in marketing execution. And it's the timing of creating and activating content is such that it really has a big effect on your ability to actually do marketing, that you need a process around that as well, be able to figure it out. You also need to understand your resources. So that's budget, but it's also the people and your partners that are working with you. And you need some tools or some sort of technology platform that you can work with so that you can capture your plans and then build your goals, understand where you're trying to go, to be able to capture the measurement and performance that you're achieving. So maybe in some form of a calendar or something like that, that gives you the ability to know where you are vis-a-vis your goals, and then to be able to predict where you're heading. So these are the 4 major things that you need to do it. When we look at the information, just having that information doesn't constitute a marketing plan. But what I'm going to show you in a moment is how that, by having that information, where you can use it in your marketing planning activities. Next slide. So let's look at the Forrester B2B marketing planning process. We've built it as a process. It's represented by these 7 chevrons here, and the first one I just feel like is a really critical one, and I'm going to spend a moment describing it. This is what we call the business review and alignment phase of planning. I guess it doesn't surprise me anymore because I know that it's going to happen, but it still is a little bit mind-bending to recognize that even if your top executives, your CEO and the board can hand the leaders of the organization the objectives for the business for the year, each one of those leaders interprets it slightly differently. And it's really incumbent upon marketing as they go through the planning process to make sure that their understanding of what the business objectives are for the year are understood and shared by sales and by product counterparts. I can give you an example is, think about from a business unit leader's perspective, they're thinking about their products, where they're going to sell, what they're going to be launching. And so their view of what the objectives are for the business are really in the context of their products. Sales is thinking about territories and maybe different account sizes and so forth. And so when they look at their business goals, they're going to have a different view. And then marketing needs to figure out how they're going to balance all their program and campaign activities to support the different perspectives that these other parts of the organization have. So step 1 in the marketing planning process is to understand a common set of assumptions. Understand what the assumptions are for the organization in terms of its business objectives. And then from there, we get into looking at each of the sort of big rocks that you want to go after, the big segments or big plan objectives, and understand whether you're going to be doing something brand new from a marketing perspective, or maybe trying to grow an existing segment, perhaps focus on retention, maybe extracting yourself from a particular segment because time's moving on and you're moving out of a market. That's what we call the marketing intent. And as you develop a notion of essentially what strategy you're going to apply in each of these areas, you can then begin to factor in all of the priorities that marketing has to consider, many of which are not directly related to revenue. So it could be marketing enablement, it could be signage, it could be some sort of brand initiative, or maybe some sort of customer initiative that needs to be put in place and added on to the work of marketing. But by the time you get through establishing the marketing priorities, you're now ready to set specific marketing goals. And that's where you define objectives that is going to represent what it is that marketing is going to achieve. It might be contribution to pipeline in some way. It might be some level of engagement. It might be moving from some level of overall market awareness to another level, maybe brand strength kinds of metrics that you're putting down. But at this point, what we're looking for you to be able to do is to define what we call impact-oriented metrics. Impact-oriented meaning they really do push towards the bottom line of the organization. They're strategic goals that you're defining for all of the different segments you want to go after. And then at this point, you can figure out, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to execute? And those are the campaigns, the programs that you're going to go execute. And then from there, you've got pretty good much the picture of what you're going to do. we believe it's really critical to identify risks and dependencies. What are the things that have to be there in order for you to be able to do your job? So for example, if you've got new products coming out and you're committing to revenue or some sort of contribution to revenue, then those products ought to be delivered on time, and that might be a dependency that you have. So from there, once you've captured all of that information, then you have to have a process for being able to evolve the plan as the situation changes. So in a nutshell, that's the big picture planning process that we work with at Forrester. A lot of our clients have adopted this. It turns out to be very useful, and I'm going to show you how to put it to work. Next slide, please. The other thing that is really important to think about is how you want to allocate your budget resources. So we have this budget allocation process. And I mentioned one of the challenges that marketing organizations have is they start from a bottoms up perspective. This is how you do it top down. And what we look at is in any given year, marketing is going to get a budget. And that budget is going to be something like last year's budget. It might be less, it might be more, but roughly you're going to be able to know whether it's a little more or a little less than last year. So you've got some idea of the scale of the budget. You don't even have to know the number, but what you can do is begin to partition it out. So we take this allocation approach where step one is to break the head count out from the marketing program spend so that you can focus on what the program spend is going to do, because that's where you're going to be able to drive action. And then when you look inside the program spend, we have found it really useful to think about what's in a campaign, where a campaign is aligned to specific business objectives, and then what's in this out of campaign category, where there's a lot of the necessary activities that marketing has to do that aren't directly related to your revenue development or your revenue acquisition. So we think of shared services as something that might fit in there. Your overhead activities. You might have an annual customer event that everyone participates in, and trying to account for that and develop ROI for that might not be a practical thing to do. So you might put that in out of campaign. Now, communications, PR, some of the influencer kinds of activities that you do that are not specific to your market segments, they can fit in this out of campaign category. And what that frees up is the ability to build campaigns that are focused on achieving specific revenue objectives that are a lot easier to measure. Now, the 60-30 or 70-30 split that I've got here, this is pretty common. This is what we see over years of working with companies. It seems to be a pretty reasonable balance. Some companies may be a little bit higher in one category versus another, and there's lots of reasons for that, and we can help them figure out whether it's a sign of problems or whether it makes sense given their particular circumstances. But this is a big picture view of how we believe marketing budget should be allocated. And what you're doing here is looking at the campaigns, trying to proportionally allocate the scale of the campaigns to your specific objectives. Next slide, Jen. And then I just quickly want to give you some insight into how we think about marketing planning roles. We've got the CMO and the marketing leader. We've got a marketing or a revenue operations group, and we've tried to split out the responsibilities. So the CMO owns the budget, is responsible for the budget strategy, is responsible for making the plan align to the business objectives. But then marketing operations is a very helpful partner in all of this process that understands the process, develops it, may support it with the technology. They help produce the measurement reporting. They do the sort of day-to-day aspects, operational aspects of managing the budget. And there should be a really tight relationship between the marketing leadership and the marketing operations group to get that plan built, communicated, and running. Next slide.
Great. So I thought that maybe we would come back to the slide that you referenced earlier about the ingredients you need, because that last one was tools, right? At the end of the day, tools like a system of record, this concept. And I thought maybe I would address a little bit about why we see this problem growing amongst the companies that we engage with and our customers, et cetera. And it really is because even though all of those things lay out nicely on your plan and your planning system, and you'll get to the plan on the page that ties them together, once a plan is created and launched, it rarely survives contact with the enemy, right? It seems like we're in a period of continuous pivoting. continuous disruption, right? If you just think about the last couple of years, we all have plenty of examples of where we had to go back to the plan and shift strategies. One of the problems that happens is once that plan launches and things change, is suddenly you get this notion of plan drift, right? And the lack of any system of record that shows where you are against the plan, the objectives it ties to, the downstream activities, and the performance of that plan creates what we refer to as the fog of marketing. It gets really hard to answer these simple questions that are up here on the slide, which come from a variety of different areas of the business. If you think about it, while you may have your strategy and your objective established, and your finance team has their system of record for financial costs and accounting, purchasing systems, you may be using work management systems. You know, it might be a Workfront or Asana or Reich or something else. You have all of these systems that contribute to the plan, but there is no centralized system that captures the inputs and outputs from these across the organization. What exists in that murky middle ground is this essentially freeware, right? Most plans today are articulated in PowerPoint on slides, right? They're trotted out with much fanfare at the beginning of the year. They used to present, fire up the team, et cetera. And then they're put onto the shelf and, or a virtual shelf, some drive somewhere on SharePoint and rarely accessed again, or multiple versions of those plans begin to happen. The actual work that gets done often is communicated about in Slack or email, and the actual dollars that fund the plan are frequently tracked in spreadsheets. Even at the most sophisticated, large, well-recognized organizations, spreadsheets abound, and every version of that spreadsheet creates gaps in collaboration and communication and understanding. It creates errors, version control issues. Eventually you get to a point where nobody really can answer the question, do we have enough money to fund the plan? And how much of that money is left right now? So then what challenges come with that? Well, number one is, of course, we talked about visibility, right? At any given time, people across the organization don't have a single common view of what the plan is and what the resources are behind that plan. The lack of view creates doubt, right? And it creates gaps, credibility gaps, right? That's how can marketing be viewed as a good steward for corporate resources if they don't exactly know how much money is in the budget and how that money is being used at any given time and what the ROI or impact is for that dollar. With the lack of visibility comes this challenge around velocity. How can you move with speed to market to capture market opportunities, right? Or to gain competitive share or wallet share quickly? If there isn't a single system of record, if people aren't on the same page, if you don't have the resources aligned. And today, in this market, speed wins. Could be the most important decisive factor in capturing market share is how quickly you can get your offer to the right audience at the right time. And if that plan needs to change, which they all do, and your original plan is not fed by any performance data at all, how can you effectively pivot? How do you know where to pivot? You know, what is your heads up display or your early warning system to suggest that the plan that you so carefully articulated is going down the wrong path, headed in the wrong direction? That creates a lack of agility, right? Where people can't pivot as quickly as they want. That is what we call the fog of marketing, and it's around this lack of a true system of record.
All right, thanks, Jim. So what I'm going to do now is to show you how you can take the information and all the aspects of the components you need to build a plan, how they all fit together into that process. Go to the next slide here. So what we've done is taken all the different information and broken it into three categories. Strategy, so what the company's trying to accomplish, and the direction, the organization's strategy, marketing strategy. What we know about the products that we have to sell and the audience that we're selling to, and then what we understand about the revenue picture, what we're trying to accomplish from a revenue perspective and how that breaks down across different segments as we get into more detailed planning. And then we're going to feed it into different phases of the planning process to produce an overall marketing plan. So the next slide, we get into putting the strategy, the product and audience information, and the revenue plan into the business review and alignment section. Go ahead and click forward, Jim. I think you need to hit it one more time because there's a build here.
There you go.
All right, so in the first phase of the planning process is around business review and alignment. And the information we need there is what the overall growth objectives for the organization. How do we prioritize those? Do we have any major new offerings, big deal launches that are going to be happening this year that are going to change the overall scope and scale of the plan as we understand it? And what sort of priorities across the different segments? Maybe we're going into a new route to market, or perhaps a geographic expansion. These kinds of things are the kinds of information that you need to have together in your initial phase of the marketing plan, as well as the overall revenue target. So these are the core sets of numbers that you're starting towards, and this is what you're going to be measured against. So you've got a big set of objectives here, and as you get into setting your goals, you're going to be looking back at these objectives to make sure that you're on track. Next slide, please. So the next big step in this process is to go through and develop a prioritization of all the things that marketing can do. Literally, any planning process that you go through in a marketing organization, you're going to come up with a list of things that you could do that's longer than you have the resources and the time to be able to do. So you have to prioritize. And the things that you have to factor in are there any strategic initiatives? Like maybe there's a brand initiative or a customer initiative. Do you have any new product launches that you have to support? Is there some sort of competitive situation, maybe in one of the segments or maybe in a geography, that you have to do something special to support? And then as you begin to get to this part of the planning process, you should begin to break down the revenue by all the different segments and all the different routes to market, so that you understand where the revenue is coming from and how you're going to support it from a marketing perspective. And then the next step is to set the marketing goals. So here, what you're doing is saying, now that I know what all the priorities are and all the big picture objectives that I have, how do I go back and align that to the business objectives? So take the big picture business objectives and then set metrics that you're trying to achieve that will be able to articulate whether you're there or not. Now, what we recommend is that you set metrics that are what we call impact-oriented metrics. These are essentially bottom line metrics. So looking at things like revenue or contribution to pipeline, these kinds of dollar-oriented metrics that you might find in the 10K of an annual report. Some of the objectives that you might have in your marketing plan could be around reputation or maybe more customer retention, and you can build metrics around those. It might not necessarily be like retention is usually related to dollars, but sometimes the reputation metrics are more about brand position, brand strength and awareness, perception, preference kinds of metrics. But each of those can be defined and established as the strategic objectives, and then that's what marketing is working towards. So at this point, you've got a good picture of what you're trying to accomplish when you finish this phase, and then you go into the developing the key actions, the campaign plans that you're going to operate with. And then the final thing you want to do as you build out the plan is to identify the risks and dependencies. And the easy one to always pick on is, do I have the budget to support all of this? And of course that's important, but it's not the only thing. So there's other things that you need to identify that might prevent you from achieving your objective or might enable you to achieve your objective. So perhaps you need to put some infrastructure in place. It could be that you're going into a market where it's more of a transactional relationship with your buyers and you have to do e-commerce. So might have to build out some e-commerce infrastructure or bring on a partner that can support that for you. And that's a dependency on your ability to be able to complete your plan. I mentioned, the products that you're trying to launch, they need to be available. Certainly that's a risk. And, anybody that's been in a business where there's, sometimes products don't come in on time, what I'm talking about is, you can gear up an entire marketing organization to do something. And if the products aren't ready, it can become a real challenge. So you have to understand what those risks are. And then as they become more and more real, you can make adjustments to it. And then finally, from the revenue plan perspective, understanding the sales organization, what they're trying to accomplish. Sorry about that, Jim. Go ahead. And
no worries.
So what comes out of all of this? Well, we have this template we call a marketing plan on a page. And this is, just a really useful, easy to fill out and easy to understand template for representing an entire marketing plan. And you can see that the steps of the plan on a page template align directly to the marketing planning process. And if you dig deeper into the marketing planning process, you'll find that for each of those phases, we have a series of worksheets or tools to help you figure out what the ultimate output of that particular phase is, and then you can drop it into the marketing plan on a page. And so the output of each of those phases is one of these cells in the marketing plan on a page. And what I'm going to show you now is an example of one where we filled it in to give you an idea of the kinds of information that would go in there. So we've got a blank version of it here, and I'm going to walk you through the top row of one example, and then I'll show you the whole thing filled in. So go ahead and hit the build there. So in this particular business segment, we've got a 10% segment growth, and we're trying to achieve a certain dollar amount of revenue. In this particular case, it turns out that this is all going to be created by retaining existing customers, renewing them, and then growing upsell and cross-sell revenue. So there's no acquisition revenue in this particular segment that we're looking at. So we're defining the approach, strategies, retention, and growth. Now factoring in all of the different priorities that might be important. So in here, you can see things like, well, we've got some brand activities that we have to support. We've got an infrastructure, digital marketing environment that has to be put in place. We've got an annual event that we have to support that's on top of all the other revenue-oriented activities that are going on. So we're factoring on all those marketing priorities. And at this point, we can begin to define marketing goals. And so for this particular area, well, we're looking at a retention rate that we're going to be measured on. And we're also looking at a certain dollar amount of upsell and cross-sell pipeline. We've even broken it out into what's sourced and what's influenced so that it's very clear what marketing is trying to do. And with numbers like this, you can then see whether marketing is achieving its objectives or not. You can go through the intellectual process of figuring out whether $135 million is the right number at the beginning of the planning process. And then as you work through it, you will be able to see if you're actually measuring up. And if you're not, then figure out what it is you have to do to make adjustments to achieve it. Then the key actions is about activating or creating a campaign or extending an existing campaign for to support. In this case, we're going to have to build a new customer retention campaign, and we're also going to take this one campaign called Protect, Detect, Connect. We're going to extend that into enterprise upsell and cross-sell. So a change to the campaign, but that's the key action that we're taking. And then there's some dependencies and risks in here that we want to identify for this particular segment. As we need the infrastructure to be able to support the environment that we're putting in place, and made to upskill the team a little bit in ABM to be able to do some of the customer retention activities. So that's the plan for that whole row. One more click will build out the whole plan, and you can see how an entire organization, this actually represents a $750 million company, who got their entire marketing plan on one page. So let's go to the next slide and talk about how we can cascade this plan across the organization. So now you've got this big picture plan. There's lots of different perspectives that different parts of the organization want to have around that plan. So the nice thing is you've got this one-page document. You can share it with your CEO, your peers, but your campaigns team, well, maybe there's a couple of campaigns and they need to understand their part of the job. So you can break that plan into campaign 1 and 2, or 1, 2, and 3. If you're dealing with product business unit leaders, you might need to break that plan on a page into one for each of the business units so that they can understand how the marketing initiatives are working with their product portfolios. You might be going to different geographies, so maybe there's a US and an EMEA version of it, and you might have some channels that you have to deal with. So you might have direct and indirect as another version of the plan. So you can cascade it and break it into these different forms so that the audiences that care about the marketing plans from sort of where they sit in the organization can operate with different views of it. And ideally, it all rolls back up into the master plan. Next slide, please. And then one of the really important aspects of managing a marketing plan as you go through time is to be able to understand where you are. And the quarterly business review has always been something to either dread or master. And the dread version of the QBR is 2 hours of just talking and puffing about what's going on, but sort of avoiding all the important questions. The mastery of it is to really focus on the business objectives. Look at that plan on a page. What are you trying to accomplish from a business objective perspective? Where do you stand in achieving your goals as defined by the metrics in that middle column of the plan on a page. And then the rest of it becomes, well, what are we going to do about it? Why did it happen? And what are we going to do about it? Where are we doing well and where are we doing poorly? And what sort of needs do you have to be able to either get back on plan or take advantage of the things that are going really well that maybe even do better? So a very focused approach to a QBR. You can cover something like this in a relatively short period of time, and you can really use it through a platform. So this is where a technology platform can help with the review process and the review conversations. All right, over to you to the next slide.
Thanks, Craig. So I think that what we've gone through and addressed a lot of what I called plan anxiety at the beginning of this presentation, right? It's certainly that issue of like, okay, what is the framework? What is the best practice? What is the system you use to do effective planning? So great detail. This is just 3 examples of customers that we work with that have done a great job to transform their planning process, each of them in very different ways, and they're different types of organizations. I won't go through all 3 of them. I will tell you that we have pretty comprehensive case studies and customer stories on our website, so you can look it up. I think the first one is pretty interesting, SAP, just because SAP is the ERP infrastructure for many large enterprise organizations, and yet even at SAP, they had a significant planning challenge, right? The lack of a system and the silos that I mentioned really slowed the planning process, such that the planning process could start in any year in the Q3 timeframe, and the plan itself wouldn't be complete and final until well into the next year that the plan actually governed. In this case, it wasn't until May that the plan was actually complete. That kind of provided instructions and guidance for a time period of which 5 months have already gone by. So you can imagine just how stifling that is as an organization. You're talking about thousands of marketers, and any given point, hundreds of people are involved in the planning time. Now, since moving to the system of record, right, adopting some of these best practices, they'd be able to cut the planning time in half, and it provides much greater agility. So when 2 years ago, SAP needed to suddenly change plans and jump into the cloud computing space for a segment they didn't typically sell to, they were able to shift really quickly, shift their funding, and ensure they could get the teams on page so they could execute that in less than 45 days. That is kind of unheard of agility in the SAP world. They've really been able to accomplish amazing things. And all of this came from a presentation that I actually heard given to at a conference last year, which was really inspiring. I would encourage you to check out some of these examples and more. They are both best practices in establishing that framework and the system and the common language and nomenclature, as well as, you know, deploying software and best practices around that. This really is transformational change. But I will not carry on too much with this, and we'll just jump right to, I think, the part was most interesting, which is some of the questions we might have gotten from the audience during the course of the presentation. So before I do that, I'll just say, Craig, thank you very much. I appreciate it. There's great learnings here. I know it comes with, you've talked with a lot of marketers and have established some great best practices. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
I am going to turn it over to Tao. I don't know, Tao, if you have a question queued up from today.
Yep, I think we have time for probably 1 or 2 questions. One came in from Matt. How do you fold in marketing initiatives that would be considered enterprise-wide and not tied to a single business unit? Craig, did you want to take this one?
Sure. You know, I think the planning process really comprehends all scales of the initiatives. Kind of to some degree, it depends on where you are in the organization. One of the things that I find is that I'm not always dealing with CMO of the big enterprise, and from there, so it could be a head of a BU, and you know they're focused on the initiatives that they're responsible for in their BU or maybe in their geography. But when we are dealing with the CMO at a top level, then generally what happens is they've got their corporate initiatives that they're trying to plan for, and then they've got to roll up all the other initiatives that fall underneath them. If they fall out of the BUs, then that's you know, then you end up with sort of BU aligned planning initiatives. sometimes when you adopt a campaign architecture, you'll find that the campaigns are focused on segments or audiences that might have needs that cut across business units. And so a BU aligned planning effort isn't always the best idea in that kind of situation, because you might have buyers that want to buy, 2 products from BU1 and 3 products from BU2. And so if you're going to build campaigns around them, you need to find another organizing principle rather than just the physical structure of the organization to organize your campaigns. I could say, Matt, that when we work with companies to help them build their planning and their campaign architectures, trying to play out the different shapes of that hierarchy is one of the more challenging aspects of building it. And it's where we spend a lot of time, so I guess the high level answer that I can give you is that it's quite possible to do that. It's, exactly what you want to do. It depends on where you're starting, what level in the organization you're actually starting, but, getting to what that campaign architecture looks like. Is it aligned around customers and their needs, or is it aligned around how the company is organized? Sometimes some organizations, it makes sense to align around the way you're structured, but in many cases it doesn't. And I think that that's what falls out of the planning process, is to try to put together the audience framework in the most appropriate way. And by the way, I'd be happy to have a deeper conversation with you about it if you've got something specific in mind that you're working with.
Very good. Tao, is there another question we can squeeze in, or should we move right to, I'll just give a quick reminder that for those of you who joined late, like right after the Q&A session, and again, everything is recorded and will be distributed to you, but right after that, if you're interested in sticking around, seeing what a marketing system of record looks like, the marketing software, planning software, please do. And we're going to spend 15 minutes walking through that. Is there another question that we have time to address, Tao?
No, I think we should get on to the live demo portion.
Awesome. We will do that. So, Craig, thank you very much for your expertise on the matter. We are now going to turn it over to UpTempo's Senior Vice President of Global Solutions Engineering, Bruce Bryan. And Bruce is going to give everyone a quick overview of what planning software looks like. But before we do that, because I'm the marketer, I can't help, I would also encourage you to register for our marketing planning crash course. You can find that on our homepage. It is a whole whackload of content around best practices in planning from practitioners and peers. So it might be worth checking out as well. Bruce, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Craig. That was fantastic insights and information to share with all of us. That's really, really helpful. What I'm going to do is we're going to jump right in. I'm sure that you have seen enough of PowerPoint at this point. So I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that you're seeing software at this point going forward. So where I wanted to start, and I really want to focus on the kind of the journey that Craig took us through in that B2B marketing planning process. So if you think about that plan on a page and those business objectives and the marketing approach and so forth, we start with a strategy section of UpTempo. And in here is where I can really record my plan on a page. So I can put my business objectives and my marketing approach at this highest level. I can cascade those into my marketing priorities and goals in the form of OKRs with specific capabilities to record those. As an example, when I open that up, I can have places for each key result in there. I can record status updates in there. So this enables me to have both the higher level and the detailed level within the same panel so that I can create that 2-level approach at a time. And then I can finish off with my key actions or my marketing team level objectives. When you want to see how these are connected together, all I have to do is click on the connections. That'll detail them out, and it'll show me that B2B, global B2B sales revenue marketing priority is addressing both of these business objectives, and it is supported by these key actions. So regardless of which direction I go, when I look at those partnerships, well, that's going to cascade back up to 4 of my marketing priorities in support of 3 of my business objectives. So it's real easy to kind of get that plan on a page, properly documented in an environment where we can keep it updated with statuses and so forth. I can even see at the key actions level what elements of my plan and my budget are being supported by this. So I know we have to go fast, so I'm just kind of give you some highlights as we go. So the next place that I want to take us is if you need to articulate a strategic plan, one of the advanced capabilities that we're offering now in our planning side of the house is that we can house multiple and different planning hierarchies at the same time. So in this case, I've got a strategic plan, and I collect different pieces of information at each level of my strategic plan, through my strategic initiatives down to my campaigns. And I can highlight all of that in a go-to-market calendar where I can see what's going to be happening and when. And I need to apologize. I got to move the sharing bar out of my way. There we go. All right. So once we, and any item in my strategic plan, as you can see, I can capture the details of it here. And in this case, I'm looking for target customer segments and things like that. At the plan level, I want to record a SWOT analysis. And down here at the strategic program level, I want to start requesting CapEx and OpEx budgets and those types of things. Now, that's one view of my plan. Another view of my plan might be the more detailed view, where I've got everything laid out now to execute against. So I might have a channel marketing plan, a media plan, a B2B plan, and a B2C plan. Our demo company is both B2B and B2C, so we have to have all of these different planning elements in place. When I open up one of those planning elements, I can see all of the details from a campaign, program, activity level point of view, and you can articulate those levels to be whatever you need, and also collect, again, whatever data you need to collect at these different levels. So at a campaign level, I might just have objectives and themes running through. At a program level, I might have a representation of my offerings, a nod to the program family that we're part of. And then when I get down to the tactic level, this is where it gets really interesting, because I can have different tactic types. This one is content. So for content, I can pick up different pieces of information than I would for a webinar or an event or an email nurture. So we want to make it easy for marketers to only enter what they have to enter. So we've got a number of different templates and configurable hierarchy that can be built to support whatever you need to go to market. Now, once I'm in one of these plan elements, and I'm going to pick a specific one that I know I've got some good detail on. So this is going to be filled in with whatever custom attributes I decide I need to collect for this type of activity. But this is also where, if you think of the budget as my source of funds, the plan is going to dictate my use of funds. So I'm going to have a budget tab where I'm actually connecting out to a marketing budget, and I can see which of the budget costs, budget elements I'm consuming to get to my total. Now, if I need to do some more budget work, issue purchases, and those types of things, I can simply click on that, and that will open up my investment tab, and it'll bring me right to the budget I'm supposed to be in, to the element that I'm working from. From there, I can request a PR, raise a purchase requisition. I can fill in any details around the investment, the accounting details. All of those pieces of information are stored on the budget, so I can relate and be part of that world. Back where I left off, I can also explore the impact of this particular item. I can identify the number of, in this case, inquiries that it's going to drive. I have a funnel assumptions that are associated with this, so I can see my detailed funnel, my number of days, my deal size, and my conversion rates throughout, so that I can calculate that if I do generate 15,377 inquiries, I should be able to produce 5.6 million in revenue off of this. I've got it distributed monthly. I can edit that distribution. I can cross it into multiple years. We also understand the fact that marketing plans span years while marketing budgets are confined to individual years. So an element of my marketing plan can consume budgets in multiple years, which is really helpful for things like events where I got to pay for the sponsorship in 2023 and the event is actually in 2024. I know that that's something that everybody's experienced. We're also, the element of time comes into play along with those conversions. So I can see on the purple here, I'm looking at the number of planned inquiries as this thing rolls out. And then as those inquiries manifest themselves as revenue, we can see later on in time how the revenue bar starts to pick up until they pretty much converge at the end, where I've gotten all of the revenue I'm going to get out of those inquiries. And we've got those as two separate bars on here. Now, in addition to the impact, we're also able to support production workflows. And that's where I've got the detailed insights about my production kit itself. And this is going to throw me in there. It'll bring me right to it. I wasn't connected to Job Manager, but here we are. And this is going to pull up this specific job. This is where I can have my briefings, my approvals, my production flow. I can pull in information that I've inherited from the plan itself. I can get into any details. I can pull in the creative. I can add assets from my media library and also understand where we are in terms of any discussion points on this job, keeping track of all of the work that's being done to bring this plan to life. Finally, I wanted to take an alternate view. As Craig said, it doesn't always fit the initial structure that we've created. So I have a go-to-market structure that I've put in place for campaigns and programs and so forth. And where we're going to end up on this is that I've got a list of tactics. I cut out from the view all the other pieces of it. And what I'm going to do instead is say, well, I don't want to look at it from that point of view. I want to come down to the tactic level and look at it from a customer journey stage point of view. So when I apply that now, I've got, and I can filter these out. I've got my different customer journey stages. When I open up any one of those, I can see all of the tactics that are designed to impact that particular stage. And I could have done that grouping by just about anything that you can imagine, including program family or down at the activation level, ad layouts, if I'm just looking at media and those types of things, campaign themes, objectives. So pivot the plan around whatever makes sense for you to see all those levels of details. And then finally, like we talked about, I can attach to a specific piece of the budget. I can also accommodate all of that non-program spend, that headcount spend in additional budget categories. I can, the out-of-program campaign spend can all be articulated through the budget so that I can capture the level of detail on costs that I need to from a budget perspective, which in the case of an event goes deeper than the level at which I'm going to bring in performance. And on the activity side of the house and the marketing planning side of the house, I can set that up to capture a level of detail where I want to collect performance. So by having this split hierarchy between the budget and the plan, I'm able to really mimic the way your business operates. I can go deeper on either side as it makes sense. And hopefully in a very short amount of time, I've gotten you excited enough to want to explore this further, but just wanted to give you some highlights as to how a system of record for marketing can support and mimic the pieces that Craig talked about from a plan on a page and a budget allocation process as to how we can work all of that together. So, Jim, that's about as fast as I've ever gone through something like this. And I think that I'm open to additional Q&A or chat at this point.
Bruce, that was great. Thank you. Definitely a challenge or so, and enterprise marketing planning system in 15 minutes or less. There's a lot involved, obviously. We talk about plan, spend, and work coming together, but there's a lot more pieces to the puzzle than that under the cover. So thank you, Bruce. That was great. For those of you that stuck around, I really appreciate you spending some time to get a look at the Uptempo platform. If you have questions about it, because we need to wrap up today's call, if you have questions about it, I would encourage you to visit our website, reach out to us, contact us, or just hit request a demo, and we can actually answer your specific questions and go deeper. In the meantime, I just want to, again, thank you. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. We will be sending out the recording of today's presentation to all the registrants and attendees. I wish you a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and fantastic planning season. Thank you.